right back. Thank you very much. That's all I
Thank you
have.
very much. Dave?
Dave, I read your book this last weekend,
The common
Common
sense one?
sense,
The Death of Common
Dave and
Sense.
Jane, Janky, 8428 Eastwood Road. Bringing it up, I just wondered, listening to this conversation, if anybody up there's got any common sense anymore. And I'm just kidding. She read her book. But let's face the facts here. Let's face it. First of all, the council said they're open to this. Every argument that I have heard, and I haven't heard them from all of them, seems to defend this, spending this money. And you know, years ago, my dad used to send me out on the farm. He'd say, you got to get that lawn cut with the lawnmower. I'd go out there and I'd cut a little piece off of there. And he'd tell me, you ain't gaining anything every day. He said, maybe you better switch your plan. And you'll get the lawn cut. The same thing with our water meters. If the updating isn't working, then why hasn't someone put a plan in, just like they suggested, to get it updated in a proper manner? Why would we put a system in and say it isn't working, so we got to buy a brand new one? Why have we had to take? I mean, you talk about Reagan getting us in debt.
No, that was Dwayne that said that.
I agree, and you agree what he did to us. $750,000 is a lot of money, and we haven't thought about one thing of sitting down and saying, let's put a plan in to update it in 10 years or 12 years. Also, talking about, it says in this letter, it'd take a long time to pay for this system. You know, I just went to a seminar about credit cards and financing. And I know this finance man can sit down there, and if you save for something or borrow for something, you would be surprised how quickly you can pay for that thing instead of financing it. Did anybody ever, I didn't see no figures on this particular, like you said, it takes a long time to pay for this. When you save and you get interest, or when you borrow, it seems to double, because I ask people that are in trouble with their credit cards. I just can't believe this. Like I said, when you got a plan that isn't working, I can't understand why we don't sit down and say, let's put in a plan to replace these meters. And years ago, they did talk about that. Okay, I agree with you, the plan isn't working. If my plan isn't working at work, we do something different to make it work. But instead, no, let's kick it out, spend, like I said, you're talking about $750,000 here, and with Shoreview felt it was too expensive. I mean, you named some that had it, but they felt it was too expensive. And I'm telling you, the cities are getting in trouble. And honest, we got to take a good look at how we do our business and how we spend our money. Because most companies, most people get in trouble when they spend money without looking at another plan. And I'm not saying I'm totally against this, but I still think plan number 4, or however it is, we got to look into it and find out, okay, how fast can we update it? Let's change it. Let's put in 20. I don't know if 20 years. He said there's one in there 20 years working 100%. I think there's a lot of options here to update this plan, expedite it, and say this is our goal. We want all the meters in Mounds View over a certain period of time with this type of money. Like I said, again, I'm going to emphasize that. And $3, you know, I get a kick out of this. $3 a month more. Maybe
No,
it
quarter.
doesn't say that, or a quarter.
Quarter.
It says in there that isn't, or it could raise. Doesn't say that exactly, but it doesn't say it's going to stay at $3.
Well, nobody can commit future councils to anything.
Exactly. So
Well,
you know, a lot of people think, well, it's only going to cost me $3. But like I said, I'm really asking you to think about plan number 4. How can we set a plan? Why did we do more thinking? And we've all, I mean, a couple of you defended it to the hilt, but why can't we take a good look at plan? You know, I bought a little old shack in Mounds View, and if I would have never fixed it up, it would never be what it is today.
I got it. We're arguing who's going to come after you. Not after, but I mean.
But I'll tell you something, if I would have said, well, I'm only going to fix one window and 3 break, I would have never got it fixed up. So you put in a plan to come up to where it's supposed to be. And nothing has been done or said about a plan. Hey, it isn't working. I mean, if you had a plan in your family and it wasn't working, I think you'd change it in a hurry, wouldn't you? That's all I got to say. I don't want to take up any more of your time.
Okay, well.
I want you to take a real good look at a plan that.
Dave, before, you know, if you say that, let me get back to one thing. You're talking about plan to update the system. And why didn't we? Well, we did. But 2020 hindsight is easy now.
Right.
Because we're sitting back and looking at the decisions we made on this council in the 80s and early 90s. We sat here and we said, okay, what can we do by taking as little as we can from the residents and not do what some of the other cities around us, you know, they're saying, okay, we had levy limits, let's, you know, the other city says, well, let's go to the top of the levy limit and put this extra money aside or spend it. We said, well, just what do we need to do, what's the minimum we need to do to, you know, to get the job done. 2020 hindsight says, we were wrong, they were right. I guarantee you, the residents at that point in time were saying, yeah, you're doing it right. But now we're hearing, because we've got to try to catch up in some of this stuff, we're saying, well, geez, why didn't you do it then? 2020 hindsight said, yeah, we should have. But what we were doing and the decisions we were making at this point, at that time, we're saying, okay, what's the minimum we can do? So we don't go out and take a bunch of money from our residents. Let them keep as much as they can. And 2020, like I say, 2020 hindsight says we shouldn't have done that. We should have said, okay, what is the optimum, you know, what should we be doing? Not the minimum, maybe the middle ground. We didn't do that. And we're paying the piper now for those decisions. And I helped make those decisions. I will tell you that right now.
I agree with you. And I didn't hear anybody saying anything about 2020 hindsight.
Well,
All I said was, if the plan ain't working, I've had some plans that didn't work very well. Change them.
that's what we're talking
Change
about
them.
doing.
But I sure did. I sure couldn't afford to change those plans to, and it fit where it was, but I didn't change it to like the village spending $750,000. Jerry, I think there's another way to update that plan in a very manner within this guideline of 12 years of payoff or 20 years, whatever it is. I believe we can change all those meters out with a good layout plan with a lot less money.
And
But I haven't
and
even,
what's a lot less? I guess I sit back and looking at over 12 years, you know, 500,000 or 800,000 is what we're looking at. Okay, over 12 years, you know, what does that come out to be a year? You know, I don't have a calculator handy.
and like I
You know,
said,
I mean,
if you don't
then
borrow
you
it,
sit back and okay, and you know, at that point in time, that money's got to come from someplace also. You know, to do it, and we're looking at, I mean, it's either short term or long term. And if we go and as you know, when you do something, if it takes a long time, every year it costs you more to do that one item.
a little bit more sometimes a little bit less. Some things that went down.
Labor
Not
housing.
everything, not everything, but like I said, but I guess what bothers me more, no plan. You haven't even thought about a plan to update. You know, it's pretty interesting. Dwayne says, what are you going to do when you put this new system in? It's the same thing. We have to keep that system up to date. It wouldn't be any different than the system we had. We should have been doing the same. And I'm not going to say that because it's hindsight, but now I still think it's feasible. There's a lot of new meters out there. There's a lot of good percents out there yet. Some kind of a plan to replace the old ones to get it speeded up. I just can't believe that we're going to spend $750,000 doing an updated plan. And there is no figures on that. Nobody's even thought about that. Let's do nothing, and I don't agree with that. Let's spend $750,000. I sure don't agree with that because I don't think this city can afford to. I wouldn't want this city to go in these kinds of times. But I think there can be, and I've heard most of them say this about the same thing. They answered most of my questions, so I don't have to take up a lot of time.
Okay.
But this is one thing that I think has got to be emphasized. Let's take a good look at a plan and how we could update it and how fast.
Okay, just for comparison, we would have to, you know, not counting the 31,000 we're losing, okay? The 500,000,
That's a
506,000.
fraction of a gallon
That's right,
of
that's right.
you know,
But
that you could.
we're looking at, for the 12 years, we're looking at, I divided by 506,000 by 12, that's $42,000 a year. The 800, that's $69,000 a year. You know, and
Now,
put this way,
Jerry, I know where
42
you're leading
will
me
hire
to.
us one person.
No, I know where you're leading to me. And I'm not saying we should keep losing that. I'm not even saying that. I said,
I'm not
you
going-
can do a fraction of a percent on the gallons of water and make money. You could even do the $3 and say in 6 years, we will have a plan to replace all of them. And start adding that up. You could raise a gallon, a fraction percent, I don't know what, he can put the figures to it, and you would never lose $31,000. You could change the commercial if that's where you're losing them. And I know what he's saying there, but I said, we haven't looked at none of that. We haven't looked at any,
Yeah,
push
I
any
just-
figures except, we don't do nothing, we spend 300 or 500 or $750,000.
Well, because I guess I'm looking at, okay, I agree with you, the do nothing is not, in my eyes,
Exactly,
is not a way to go.
No.
And I've looked at this, I've, looked at the problem for 12 years. And in my, right now, to do this now at this time is the way to go because of the other things I'm looking at. $31,000 this year, let's say it's 35 next year, that we're losing, plus trying to put somebody on staff to do what you're talking about part-time,
You looked
it
at it
doesn't
for
work.
12 years. If you looked at
No,
it
we
for
did.
12 years, I would have said,
Dave.
let's raise the water a little bit so we don't lose money.
Dave,
And
we-
then start changing.
That option 4 that's suggested, we've done that. We did that through the 80s.
I didn't see anything,
Well, I said, it's not in here. But
Because
that was our,
we tried it. It didn't
that
work.
was our policy during the
Listen to
80s.
option 4 in that. Listen to option 4.
What we're saying is
As I
that
said,
we
it's-
tried option
we-
4 in the 80s and it didn't work.
No, option 4
If
says
you
replace
try-
the walls slowly.
That's right.
That's what we were
That's
doing.
right.
So it
He's,
should be all fixed.
whether,
We've been doing it for 12 years.
If you tried option 4, all the commercial meters would have been replaced in the past 2 years. And they haven't.
well, I didn't hear that level of detail about option
Right, but
4,
all
but
I'm saying is, now you said you tried that. I'm saying, okay, if you got a plan that don't work, you
We're gonna
put a
change
better
it.
plan in.
That's right,
That's
that's
right.
what we're looking at.
but
But,
Can
but it isn't necessarily to say, okay, all the meters go, except the ones he's talking about, and the other ones do. We can put in a plan. I firmly believe that Mike is smart enough to put in a plan if that's really what we wanted to do. But I don't think I think most of you don't want it. I think you got your mind made up. But I personally think that we can put in a plan that would update our water system to where you want it and not spend $750,000 within 12 years.
you have it written?
No, I believe Mike can do that.
Oh, come on,
Because
Dave.
I work for a big company and they tell me to do things like that in
Dave-
shorter times than that, let me
Yeah.
tell you.
Dave, I
Come
got-
up with a plan.
Dave-
I'm not kidding.
Dave, given that both you and I have read this book now, isn't democracy just wonderful? I mean,
No,
that you
but
get to come in here, you get to second guess, you get to give suggestions.
I'm not suggesting,
And you
I'm
get to
just
tell us our
suggesting.
problem-solving approach is really bad. Could we do that with Cisco, do you suppose, where we could come out over as customers and say to Cisco, geez,
No,
Phil?
Dude, that's what
hey,
customers do.
yeah, well, okay, and I'll answer that. I'll answer that, Sue. Remember this here. The government was to serve the people. Are we
That's right.
changing that a little bit? The
no,
people
but
serve the government?
the point is you read the book. The point is that what's happened in government is that we get so much public input and everybody's trying to respond to everything. And it's not just necessarily the elected people that should be held totally responsible. It's from all the public input that they try to take in shaping things that really leads us to something that's a little more complicated than it needs to be sometimes. That's the point. And with a private corporation, they should be customer oriented. I work for a private company. We are customer oriented, I think. But still, in your kind of business, the customer doesn't get to choose who's going to be in charge. Here, you get to at least choose who's going to be in charge.
And thank God for that.
I just
because-
want to point it out because I really enjoyed the book,
Like I
Dave.
said, and that's getting to be as you see across the country, the government, people don't, and I do, I
We
think
have to
you're all
discuss
fine
this
people.
another time. I just made that comment just for that benefit
Right,
of you and
but
I.
I still think that a plan to update that, if it wasn't working, should have been changed, and I think it can be changed to update it without spending $750,000, and I think you should take a good look at it. That's all I'm asking.
And you think Mike can do it?
Yep, I really do. I
Yeah.
think he can.
Well, I think a couple of the points that you made are points that I've felt as the newer council member who hasn't watched the water meters fall apart in 12 years. It just feels like there's a lack of some of the information that you've been asking for, which is, how bad is the system and is the decline enough to justify that kind of expense? And one of the frustrations I've had is that we've really focused on high technology to solve our answer. And I think what you're trying to say is maybe there's some other technology that isn't so pricey that will solve the problem. Is that kind of the gist of where you're trying to go? Is that,
Well,
that's
that's
kind of
what
why
I'm
we
saying.
have another option on here now. Is there is some second technology. New Brighton has bought this other system, and other cities can't afford always the best technology, but there are other systems that solve the problems. We need to find the problems.
Because I see that St. Paul is updating their system this way. That's a pretty big city. I don't think they're that dumb over there that, it ain't working for them. Maybe it's not the right